You are listening to 95.7 FM WELT, Fort Wayne, Radioactive. The opinions and views expressed in this show are those of the hosts and guests only. They do not represent those of FreeThought Fort Wayne, WELT, or any other organization. Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, where we explore science, religion, culture, ethics, and community from the humanist perspective. Join us as we discuss those topics and more, free from the ideologies of religion and superstition.
Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm here with V, Chris, Andrew, and myself as D. We are part of FreeThought Fort Wayne, and this is a humanist, secular point of view show. We'd like to look at current topics and talk about them from a non-superstitious point of view. So thank you for joining us. We just had an election last week that we're still reeling from, so we're going to spend some time talking about this and some other sundry things. So hopefully you guys aren't too worn out on election talk and thinking. But hey guys, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
I can't see how anyone would not be worn out by now.
Oh, I know, right? People just don't want to talk about it at all.
Yeah, I think it's been going on for, 18 months now?
I know. Well, I think I get the impression that even people who really supported Trump are, they aren't 100% sure what he's going to do either. So everybody's just kind of like quietly watching, waiting for the chips to start to fall where they may. Yeah. But yeah, it's been interesting.
Going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So here in Indiana, we voted predominantly for Trump, and all of our electoral college votes went to Trump. What was how strongly did we vote for Trump in Indiana? Wasn't it like 69% or something like that? Like no chance if you were not liking Trump in Indiana. Was everybody shocked who was here the night of it?
I was shocked of the results for sure. I mean, nobody expected this to happen. I don't think Trump expected to win.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, and that was the funny thing, was that I was actually upgrading a computer at the time, which basically required me to gut the entire computer and put the entire computer back together, just to find out that the power supply that I'd gotten was bad, is actually dead on arrival. But as I'm sitting here frustrated at why this computer isn't working, I'm hearing in the background these not so good signs that, Trump was winning continuously. So yeah, that was disappointing. To add to my disappointment that I was tearing apart a computer for no reason because the power supply was bad.
Oh man, yeah. So in Indiana, according to CNN, the result was 57.2% for Trump and 37.9% for Clinton, with 4.9% voting for Gary Johnson. So, wow. In Indiana at least, Gary Johnson didn't make any difference. Trump would have won regardless. But it's interesting to look at some of the counties that did go for Clinton. Marion County, which is Indianapolis, went for Clinton, and also Monroe County. I don't know what city is in Monroe County. Also Lake County, which is basically over by Gary and on the edge of Chicago. So you would expect that to have kind of the spillover effect. And it seems like St. Joseph County there is the last one that went for Clinton by a 0.2% margin. And that's, again, kind of in the northwest part of Indiana.
What did Allen County go?
Let me see. So Allen County, about the same as the state, really, 57.5 to 37.9 with 4.6 for Johnson.
Oh, in Monroe County, it's where Bloomington is.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Chris, you mentioned it being bad news for you. We have to remember that for about 50% of the electorate, it was really, really good news. Even more here in Indiana. Have you guys figured out exactly why it was good news? Did anybody here vote for Trump? If you feel comfortable saying. No, I mean, I voted for Clinton.
Yeah, I did too.
I didn't really feel comfortable voting for either one of them. and Johnson I feel is kind of an idiot. So I voted for Vermin Supreme.
Oh. Right.
It's all about the sweet boot for the hat, and I wanted a pony. He promised everyone a pony if he became president, so I wanted a pony. That's it.
I like your style there, Andrew.
It's such a common theme, though, that nobody really liked who they were voting for. You know, people that voted for Trump didn't really like voting for him. People that voted for Clinton didn't really like voting for Clinton. I think a very, very large percent of people that voted for the lesser of two evils, and they just saw the other candidate as just completely unacceptable. And, you know, so they voted for the one that's slightly more acceptable.
Yeah. Well, it seemed to me the big wrench in all of this, or in the gearbox for Clinton, was these swing states. Some of them that we didn't even think necessarily were swing states that ended up voting a different direction. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
Those are traditionally blue states, and Trump won those pretty handily.
And I think, who was it? Who was that guy? Michael Moore. He predicted that this would happen in those states because a lot of the good jobs have been routed out of those areas from, they just moved to China and Mexico. And Trump seemed to understand that, tapped into that, and really swung those states his way somehow.
Yeah, he won the Rust Belt pretty thoroughly.
Yeah, he did. That seems to be the people who switched over and made Trump the president.
Yeah, one thing that I was reading today exactly about Michigan, actually, I mean, the margin there is pretty slim. Looking at CNN, went 2,279,000 for Trump and 2,268,000 for Clinton. So the difference there seems to be about 11,700 votes, if I count correctly. 11,600 votes. And so that's not a huge margin. And one of the things that, this article I was reading today was talking about was how bad Clinton's ground game was, to the point where some of the local, the local Democratic Party in Michigan, raised separate amounts of money for people to go and knock on doors and talk to people and all that, because they just weren't spending enough on that. They had way less than volunteers and paid people that go around, way less than what Obama had. And Obama only carried the state, I think they said, by 26,000 votes last time.
Wow.
So, those are some pretty slim margins. And, a good ground game could have made a difference there. Now, I don't know if it would have made a difference in other states, but that was one that that particular article focused on, just showing some of the things where, Clinton may have screwed up. Now, of course, on the other side, Trump spent a lot less on the election in terms of money and all that. His whole, quote unquote ground game seemed to have been, a virtual non-existent when you compare it to the Clinton quote-unquote machine. So who knows how much that would have made a difference, right?
Yeah, who knows? There's a lot of things at play. I would think the constant barrage of negative emails toward Clinton from WikiLeaks had to have made a difference, I would think. So that... It seemed like even though the media was predominantly on her side, the bad news seemed to just be a continual stream for Clinton to have to fight against. And then the FBI opening the case again with these new emails, and then, clearing her again. Boy, I would just think that had to sway a lot of people. And I think it did. I think her momentum was on her side until basically the FBI reopened the case with her emails, and that seemed to be the trigger that changed the momentum against her, at least from the polls that I was hearing in the general media. But I mean, I don't know. The media, I think this election really showed that the media is just all over the board. Like, you cannot trust what they say. You have to do your homework. You need to do your homework and read from the actual source as to what people are saying instead of what you're hearing second, third hand. Like Facebook is not a good source for most things.
Oh, no. There was an interesting... Oh, go ahead.
I think it really came down to the echo chamber that like everyone was in, essentially, because Hillary Clinton supporters just thought they had it in the bag.
Yes,
because every poll showed her like with a 98% chance of winning or something like that, and then so they didn't even bother go out and vote. And with these riots now, after the election, most of the people who were writing in the big cities didn't actually vote.
See, that's the crazy part. If they didn't vote, I mean, what were you thinking? I'm all for people, protesting, expressing their opinion, all that, as long as it remains non-violent. They don't break anything, they don't destroy anything. But I mean, if you didn't vote, I almost feel like you don't really have the right to be upset right now.
Yeah, it's kind of like that's why your candidate lost, is because you didn't go out and support her.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, she had millions of votes less than what Obama had last time, or in 08. I mean, we're talking good 5-6 million votes less than what Obama had in 2012, and he had even more votes in 08. So she may have like 10 million votes less than what Obama had in 08. I mean, that's huge. That's huge.
Well, I mean, she's not an exciting candidate, to be honest with you. I voted for her because I really dislike Donald Trump.
Right.
And, you're not going to get any real enthusiasm behind you if that's what's drawing a lot of people to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know I didn't stand alone in that. A lot of people I talked to felt exactly the same way. So,
yeah, it seems like a lot of people are hungry for some change in these elections, and I mean, look at that. That's actually what Obama ran on in 08 and 2012 was on change. He promised that he would change things in Washington, and he was a brand new senator with very little experience, so he wasn't considered to be part of the establishment, and people voted for him overwhelmingly. I mean, it was his last two victories were pretty large, by significant margins in the Electoral College and in the popular vote. And just Clinton wasn't a change candidate, where Trump was, with whatever flaws people may think he had. Enough people just were not excited or for Clinton or wanted change, and they voted for him. I mean, he got very similar, I think, numbers of votes to what like Romney and McCain got. I don't think it was that different from what those guys got. So it's just that Democrats didn't seem to turn out. They weren't seeing the change that they wanted, and they probably couldn't, get themselves to vote for a Republican or for Trump for whatever reason. And that's how that happened.
Yeah. I also, my personal opinion on the election is, I mean, I believe over time we have been moving more progressively, I guess you could say, as a nation. We spread the wealth. We share the expense of roads and fire stations and police, and all these things are cooperative thinking. But that has really been fought against with this particular election, because I think a lot of people have felt left behind. And at least what that's meant to me is that you either have to, if you want to be more progressive, you have to go as everybody has to go together. At least a huge significant portion of us have to, because you can't if you leave too many people behind, we will not have a progressive movement. Yeah. And I think this middle class America, in these swing states really felt left behind economically, and that seems to be one of the drivers for why they voted the way they did, and that's kind of unfortunate. So in that one respect, I really hope Trump is successful. I really hope he brings a lot of jobs back here one way or another, and I think moving more progressively will just come about naturally with abundance.
I hope you're
who
right.
knows?
Now,
Me too.
one thing that I read in a couple of different places was, why do Republicans win the elections in what I would call Middle America? If you look at the map, where people vote Democrat is on the coast, in the north, but basically anybody in the south and in the middle of the country votes Republican. So why is that? And a lot of people have made the argument that that's a lot of small towns where you maybe have one or two large employers. When those go out of business, basically the economy of the entire town collapses. Where in some of the bigger cities, it's easier to shuffle around. I mean, you may find a less paid job, but you still have a job, and you maybe have a little more of a feel that, things are going okay. There's more opportunities, as some businesses move away, new ones come in, but it's hard to do that in small towns.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people made the argument basically that Democrats have abandoned this quote unquote middle America, the small towns, the urban areas, farmers, like all that.
Yeah, the flyover areas of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate that term.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Hillary really didn't do any campaigning like in middle America. She did barely any. She focused on the coasts and the swing states, and that was it.
And even there, she focused just on the big cities.
Exactly. Where Trump, Trump was hitting 3 or 4 cities a day.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he put some serious miles on that jet of his.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man, it paid off, and I'm still stunned by it. This is the first time we've ever elected somebody with absolutely no experience in politics as the president, and so far it seems like it's showing. And the process of getting ready to take the presidency, which has got to be an absolutely daunting task.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
you're basically building a multi-$1,000 business, more or less, or staffing a multi-thousand employee business in 3 months.
I mean, just the people that work in the White House, the numbers there are huge. And the federal budget, I guess, is something I think like 20% of GDP. I mean, that's a pretty big corporation if it was a corporation.
Oh, yeah.
It spreads to every corner of the country. It hits everything. So yeah, that would be a daunting task. One thing that I did like about Trump's message was that he seemed to imply that, he wouldn't put kind of the establishment candidates to run everything. But what we've seen recently, I think he's dipping into the good old boys club of, whoever supported him, people like Giuliani, people like, what was the other guy? Well, I guess he got rid of Chris Christie. Newt Gingrich is still in. And so he's, he kind of promised that he would have different people running things in his administration, but he seems to be tapping into the same old club of people. So
what choice do you have, really? I mean,
well, you need people that have experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's going at it like a businessman would.
Yeah.
He's a businessman.
Right.
He's trying to hire who he thinks is the best for the job, and that usually comes down to the most experience. So yeah, another thing that I read today, that Pence was eliminating all of the lobbyists from the transition team.
But that would be interesting.
Yeah. So I actually think that's probably the first good thing Pence has ever done.
That might be it. That might be it. You may have nailed it there. Yes.
Wow.
Because for the longest time, that's why I wanted Bernie to get the money out of politics.
Yeah.
And Pence is kind of going that way. Actually, it's like I don't like to agree with Pence, but that's a good idea.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now. We haven't seen a whole lot. But, I mean, a lot of what the enthusiasm behind Trump was an absolute hatred for Hillary and her being a con, getting away with breaking the law. And, Trump basically more or less promised that he was going to prosecute Hillary. And I am surprised to see how much he has shifted from that stance. Yeah. So basically Hillary was okay the whole time. So that was just a whole ploy by you to win votes. I don't.
Well, and that brings up. He's known to exaggerate things.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings up another. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He might not do anything, but there are members of Congress right now that are really looking into it, and they're probably going to wait till Trump gets into office before acting on anything. But I know I've seen so many things. There's a congressman or senator, I can't remember which one, from North Carolina, I think, Trey Gowdy. He's been ripping into everyone. It seems like Comey, members of the State Department, members of the Secret Service. He's been just ripping into everyone about Hillary Clinton and the shady stuff that's been going on.
Another big pedestal that he stood on was that the system is rigged. That seemed to have gone right out the window after he won. Apparently, it's not rigged now.
Yeah, the people on the left were all laughing at him like, ha ha ha, you think it's rigged, and then now they're all shouting like, hey, it's rigged.
Right. Yeah.
Well, at least for me, I think it is rigged, and it's rigged internally in the parties. I mean, look at what happened with Bernie. How the DNC put their hand on the scale in his favor. The Republicans did the exact same thing. I mean, to have so many of the party officials and some of the more well-known people in the party were saying some really nasty things about Trump, and they were saying they wouldn't vote for him. They were saying nobody should vote for him. He didn't get endorsed by a lot of his own party. I mean, that's unheard of. So I think we saw on both sides that there is a lot of rigging that's happening behind the scenes. It's just that in the case of the Democrats, the rigging became more obvious with all these email hacks, with exposing what Davey Wasserman Schultz was saying, and it was just crazy. It was just crazy how internally rigged things were.
Yeah,
but it's true for both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
but it's not illegal in those situations,
yes.
Right? Within the party, you can kind of rig it or whatever. And now it's unethical, I would think, but it's not illegal. Whereas if we actually rigged an election for the president, that would be a lot of legal implications.
Yeah, the primaries are considered a private affair, but the federal elections, like for president, that's federal. That's illegal. Yeah, the difference between the Democratic Party rigging against Bernie and the Republican rigging against Trump is that the Republicans didn't apparently know what they were doing and put no one forward to challenge Trump whatsoever, and Trump just steamrolled everyone.
Apparently, yeah.
And Democratic supporters. I mean, Republican supporters. They've been feeling like they've been left behind, like nobody's heard them for the last 8 years, with a Democratic president. And they were angry. The anger, they were much more angry with the current situation than the Democrats were. So I think there is something to be said about, the anger factor in the electorate when you consider who's going to win and who's going to lose, and the anger was definitely on the Republican side, and they didn't want to see any of the politicians in office. I mean, I listened to conservative talk radio just to hear the other side, and man, those guys, they they like to raise their voice against Democrats, but they sure criticize their own party, and they were feeling
they sure did.
Yeah, and they express the views of a lot of people. You hear people call those shows, and they'll be like, "Oh, I've been listening to you for so long. I completely agree with you." And so there was a large part of people that were upset at the establishment, and they saw in the face of Trump as somebody that could win, more so than someone like Carly Fiorina, because she was also a businessman that jumped into it, but fell out of the race early on. Trump had the name recognition, had the character that people were looking for, and he delivered.
Yeah, he
sure did.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I had a couple other topics on this that I wanted to discuss. I think they're pretty interesting, and one of them has to go back to the echo chamber that you mentioned, Andrew. I'm really concerned about that. This echo chamber seems to just be way more prevalent now because the internet allows this confirmation bias to just run rampant. And on both sides, it seems like on the left and the right, it's so easy to get into these, mental loops because you're only fed information that you agree with, and you're not really looking for anything that's opposing. You said, V, that you listen to talk radio, and I do too. I find it really interesting and amusing to see that side of things too. But are a lot of people just not doing that? Like, what does that mean for democracy in the long term, or just knowledge in general? Really concerned about that. I love the internet for the information that you can glean from it, but if you're not looking for it or challenging yourself, then it's not really good for civilization in general, I would think. When it comes to democracy, at least. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's not.
Well, I'll tell you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's pretty difficult to listen to some of those conservative talk radio. They are, they scream loud, and they say things you disagree with, and it's difficult to listen. I have to say that. And one thing to understand, let's say a lot of younger people say they get their news from Facebook. Well, what happens on Facebook is Facebook tracks the things that you like and shows you more things that you like. Like if you get your news from something like Yahoo News, Yahoo knows your IP address or who you are based on, if you're logged in, and they keep track of the news that you read, and they show you more news like that. So the internet is kind of doing that self-reinforcing bubble for you. Now, an interesting thing that I read somewhere, I don't remember if it was just for Facebook or in general, but they talked about news reports. I think it was just for Facebook. They were conservative leaning. 40% of the time, they were judged to be wrong, but the more liberal leaning were 20% judged to be wrong. So there's still quite that's a significant percentage to be wrong. And I've certainly come across a lot of those chain emails, that seem to be a lot more popular on the right side, on the Republican side. Like, for example, when Obamacare was first being passed, one of the guys at work forwarded me this email, and it talked about all the things that are wrong with Obamacare. And one of the things that I remember distinctly was, according to that email, the members of Congress were supposed to be exempt from Obamacare. And I was like, no, I know this is completely wrong. So I went and I dug up the exact phrasing into the law. And I mean, the sentence read, it's not word for word, but something to the extent of members of Congress are not exempt from this law. That was a sentence in the law, basically.
Right.
And that email claimed the members of Congress were exempt. And I showed it to the guy at work. and he still didn't believe it. I mean, I
know.
copied it out of the law, and he would not believe it.
Yeah, it's really disturbing to me. Yeah, and another thing too that I'm seeing is this kind of like almost messiah complex going over to Trump. Well, one, I mean,
Cult
I
of
don't know if anybody.
personality.
Yeah, well, I even heard on talk radio they were calling him the political messiah, and I was like, oh, great, this is interesting. And then I watched this video of Michelle Bachmann basically showing the results of the election where, you know, the odds were way in Hillary's and favor, and then Donald was way down here, and then that graph crossed, and she was talking about how it was the prayer group that they did at the certain time that correlated with this chart that actually changed the direction of the election. It's an amazing video of just how delusional people are, and it really saddened me. Like she was a presidential candidate, and she actually thinks that the prayer that they did changed the election. Wow. Well, I mean, do us all a favor and like heal humanity of disease if you're that powerful. My gosh. But you know, I just get concerned about this messiah complex coming over the, you know, the far right about Trump, and that is dangerous, so dangerous.
Well, let me share something on that. So it's no secret. I think I've mentioned that on previous shows that I'm originally from Bulgaria, and there's you know, when you have large parts of the population being dissatisfied, these kinds of savior characters tend to come up. I mean, here's the most ridiculous thing that happened in Bulgaria. So Bulgaria used to be a monarchy, but the monarch was kicked out when the communists came to power. Now the kid at the time that was the prince or whatever his title was, it's not a prince, but anyways, it's the equivalent of a prince. He must have been like 4 or 5 years old when he got kicked out. By the time that it was early 2000s, something like that, the really early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, the guy decided to come back to Bulgaria and run for political office. And he became prime minister. And I kid you not, half of the people referred to him as Your Highness, and half of the people referred to him as Mr. So-and-so.
Wow.
Even though he was a prime minister, people referred to him as Your Highness. I mean, people were so fed up with all literally the establishment politicians there, because the economy was going so poorly, that they were willing to vote for anyone. And he was the savior candidate. You know, he was going to come in and he was going to fix things. And then that didn't happen. Then, get this, okay, so the last communist president that we had was under house arrest for basically, once communism fell apart, for the entire time until he died, he was under house arrest. His bodyguard became the prime minister after His Highness quit. Yeah, he created a political party and he became prime minister.
Wow.
So, I mean, when you have a populace that is so dissatisfied with the establishment, they will look for these candidates, and they look for the guy that's like, you know, the straight shooter. I mean, there's really a lot of parallels, I think, between Trump and that guy that I just mentioned. There was our communist president bodyguard. You know, they're both seen as straight talkers. You know, they tell it like it is. They're both kind of bullies, you know, and people think that they're gonna go in there and take care of things. Now, the crazy thing that just happened was the woman that he supported for president lost the election. They just had elections a couple of days ago too. And he had promised that if his candidate lost the election, he would quit government. So he did. So,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, when you start messing with these savior candidates and the big promises and the disappointments from them, I mean, it really messes with people. It really messes with people.
Yeah, interesting. Well, there's a lot of. It seemed to me that a lot of people kind of bought. Well, Donald Trump really played to the people who are just really interested in conspiracy theory and really believe that, like, the government is out to get you, and that the government is totally jacked up, and that the people who run things are evil, and their intention is to just gain power and gobble it all up and take everybody's money and just rule over people.
Yeah,
It's I'm just amazed at how prevalent that is in people, and to see that that part of the population, somebody who feeded to that kind of thinking, take power in our country is alarming to me. Whew. I feel like our country really, really, more than ever, needs critical thinking. Now, I'm not saying that the people who voted for Donald Trump didn't have the reasons that were totally legitimate. I think that they did. I think I just saw a real lack of critical thinking on both sides. Too much, just, I guess, that echo chamber, really. And also, you get introduced to all these ideas on the internet, and we're really just experiencing this freshly as a civilization, as a culture. And it's so easy to see people so confident about these crazy theories with no real proof, and people just buy into them without doing any real research to find out if they're true or not. And people don't have time to do it. A lot of times they're working, just trying to feed their families, or, living their life. And the actual study it takes to actually, find some credibility to these things, they may not do for one reason or the other. So they just latch on to these things, and that cannot be the thing that sways a population toward a person in the long run. Like, we have to get past that with the majority of our population. I just very pessimistic about.
Yeah. I mean, the Democrats have been talking about the bubble that the Republicans live in for a long time. I don't know if you guys ever listened to, what's his face? He's got a show on HBO. He's a comedian on HBO, and
Bill Maher?
Bill Maher, yes. He's talked about the conservative bubble, and he's even done entire segments of his show where someone is in a bubble and all that, and how nothing gets through. But I think that this election just proved that exact same thing is happening on the Democratic side as well.
Yeah.
There was the giant bubble. Everybody if you think about it, if you live most of the time in Washington, like 80% of people in DC are Democrat, or lean Democrat, vote Democrat for one reason or another. So it's easy to be in that bubble. If you live in New York, I loved it. I was listening to an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they tried to rope him into politics. And one thing that he really pointed out, because he lives in New York, was he was saying that in New York, if you're in a group of people and somebody asks you if you know a Republican, you'd look around and be like, well, maybe that guy over there is a Republican. I'm trying to quote him, but it's difficult. But it's rare. It's rare, and these bubbles happen. Yeah. And we have to break through them. I still don't understand, and maybe you guys can help me with this. And we talked about it a little bit, but maybe, have a different perspective. But why does Middle America generally vote so overwhelmingly Republican? Any opinions?
Well, I think that's clear on the poll chart that was shared on this. Just looking at the demographics between different people and who they voted for on each side, as far as whether they voted for Clinton or Trump. I mean, it's pretty clear why Middle America voted for Trump, and that's because that's where you see the predominant number of people that are male, that are white, that are older, that are less educated, and that are religious, very religious, in fact.
Yeah.
And that tends to be the demographic that voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Which I find really fascinating because Trump coming from religion, he just didn't strike me as a very religious guy. So to him to even, be put on the same pedestal as some sort of messiah on the Christian front is really ironic to me.
Yeah, so let's go over some of these numbers. I mean, I think it's very interesting to go over some of these statistics as to how the voting happens. So we're all looking at some statistics from the New York Times, and they just break down the different demographics and how everyone voted. If you look at the race chart, whites, 58% of whites voted for Trump, and it's known, kind of the middle America, the Republican bastions have a predominantly white population. Let's see, if we go to age, younger people tend to vote for the Democratic Party, for Clinton. They voted. So only 37% of 18 to 29-year-olds voted for Trump, and 42 of the 30 to 44 voted for Trump. With some percentage there, I think, that voted for independent or other candidate or didn't vote. There's a gray bar in there. I don't know what else. What other categories struck you guys?
What I find most interesting is actually the little arrows on the far right side. The change from 2012.
Yes.
Especially in the race.
Yes.
Because
look at this. Yeah. I was
white,
just
black,
say
Hispanic,
that.
Latino, Asian, and other, they all went up on the Republican side. White went up 1%, 1 percentage point. Black went up 7 percentage points. Hispanic, Latino 8 percentage points. Asian 11 percentage points, and any other race went up one. So that's, between Obama in 2012 had it swayed more his way in those categories last time. So this time it swayed towards Trump, towards the Republican side. And I mean, the 88% to 8% black votes for Democrats and Republicans respectively. I mean, that's still really lopsided, but Trump got 7 percentage points more this year.
Yeah.
So that's what is really interesting to me, is the change from 2012.
Yeah, that is interesting. What strikes me about...
a lot of people have said that the white people won this election for Trump, but if you look at this chart, that doesn't seem to be true. I mean, that barely changed. Only 1% more of white people voted for Trump than they did for Romney in 2012. So that's that's barely changed. Like, I don't think that changed the outcome of the elections. It seems like all the other
all the other races combined, that probably is what swayed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about this education by race? The one that sticks out is white without a college degree went overwhelmingly toward Trump, whereas non-white college graduates or college graduates at all went way over to the left. That's interesting. And then the residents, obviously I think we've all seen that demographic or map of the country. Basically, the flyover states, anything that was a city went predominantly toward.
Yeah, city. It says city over 5,000, 59% Clinton to 35% Trump, and that, I mean, and then suburbs 45 to 50, small city and rural 34 to 62.
Yeah. It really was flyover America.
Yeah, and then that also goes back to education, because in the flyover states, there's a lot more people that have blue-collar jobs. They don't have a college degree.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are out of work because all the work is being sent out to other countries.
Yeah, they're likely to have more of the quote unquote low skilled jobs, factory jobs, things like that. And in those small cities of less than 50,000 people, when the big employer leaves, man, the entire place gets obliterated. In a big city, a big employer leaving may give you a little bit of a cold and you get over it. In those places, when the big employer goes, I mean, it's a pneumonia, it's a cancer, it's complete destruction.
I've also read too that people who voted like that have high expectations to get better economic situations for themselves, and they're hoping Trump delivers. And I hope Trump delivers too, but this is not something that changes overnight. Like you can, if you want manufacturing to come back to the United States, you basically have to build it again. That doesn't happen in a year. This is a long process. Massive construction has to go on to do that, even if assuming the financial incentive is there to even do it. So even if he does bring it back, I don't know if he's going to get the credit for it necessarily. So it's going to be easy for him to get some buyer's remorse possibly over the next year or two, because things aren't going to change fast enough. Possibly.
Well, I actually see, from what I've heard, from what he said, he actually does have a good plan for the short term, at least, as far as trying to rebuild and try to make America great again. Just trying to go through and repair roads and structures, and literally, basically enlist a lot of construction jobs to accomplish these tasks. And yeah, that's great. They'll provide jobs, at least in the short term, to rebuild and make America great again. But once again, that's lacking a long-term solution. So hopefully that gives them enough time to develop a long-term solution. Otherwise, yeah, a lot of people are going to be looking at him like, hey, what's going to be your solution to this?
Really?
Yeah.
It's a great time to start a construction business or some sort of business that caters to the construction industry.
Okay.
Even if it's just like delivering food or something like that, it might be a fortune to be made.
Well, I mean, it could end up being like this generation's New Deal. With Roosevelt's New Deal back during the Depression, that put a lot of people back into work. It created a lot of jobs for a lot of people around the country, and this could, his plans could go that way. I'm hoping they do, as far as the infrastructure is concerned, because I mean, we have the highest number of failing and deteriorating bridges in the developed world.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's definitely room for infrastructure improvement. I guess the problem is how do you pay for all of it and get it done without amassing a ton more debt. But you just got to let the man do his thing. I really hope he succeeds on a lot of these fronts, because it could be really good. He's just such a wild card, man. I cannot wake up. I can't wake up soon enough sometimes to see, like, what the hell did this guy just do? It's just going to be really fun to watch somebody, a total outsider, get the biggest secrets in the world, the most power in the world, and what is he going to do with it? It's going to be awesome.
I often tell myself, like, if I didn't have such a stake in this country, and because I live here, my family's here, I would be more than happy just to sit back and watch the show, just like play a fiddle while it burns, But I really care. Yeah,
me too. But nobody knows the future, I think he won the election. He's doing what politicians do. He's pivoting on a lot of issues. We're seeing like some of his plans start to come out, how he's going to maybe do some of this stuff, the people he's going to pick to run certain things. So, this idea that people are so sure that he's going to fail or that he's so awful for the country. I think people need to hold back on that because you don't know what the future is going to bring. And my life, at least, has proven that if I get really convinced about something, there's a good chance that I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Well, let's look at. Oh, go ahead.
His Trump's rhetoric about what would you say, quote unquote, draining the swamp. Cutting out the excess of government spending, and that goes along the lines of his background as a businessman. He does that stuff all the time. If a division of his of one company is not functioning correctly, he strips it down and rebuilds it from scratch. And I don't think the president actually has that kind of power, but it'd be interesting to see what he can do.
Yeah,
certainly. Well, let's move on to one of the other categories that demographic categories here that I think is fairly interesting, and that's the religious category. So it seems like Protestant or other Christians split 39-58 Clinton Trump. Catholics 45-52 Clinton Trump. So Catholics were a little more even there, but basically the other religious like Jews were 71-24 for Clinton, and that actually swung 8% more than what Obama got. However, what seems to be really interesting is the category that's something else, not the nuns. The nuns are a separate category, and they basically stayed the same, 68-26. But the something else, that would be Buddhists, that would be Muslims, that would be other religious groups. The change from 2012 was 18% in Trump's favor. So 29% of people that are in other religions, 29% voted for Trump. Now, if you subtract 18 from that, you're down to 11. So only 11% of that category would have voted for Obama 4 years ago, which I think is really interesting.
Romney.
Why would
they would vote
or Romney?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Why would that change so significantly? I mean, 18% is quite a large swing.
Is he because he was a Mormon? Maybe.
It's possible.
Yeah, that's really huge. Actually, I mean that's.
Yeah. I mean, considering some of the things that Trump said about Muslims, I could see how other religious groups may feel, okay, maybe he's not on our side, but to get that big of a swing, I don't know. It's surprising to me.
The U.S. military service is interesting too. If you serve in the military or served in the military, 61% voted for Trump.
Wow. I wonder why that is.
Yeah,
Do people maybe think that he is less likely to have an interventionist policy, so less likely to get sent to war, or
part of that might come from Hillary's warmongering, because she was really antagonizing Russia.
She was.
There.
It was getting uncomfortable.
Yeah. Considering we were at DEFCON 3, I think we got down to.
Wow.
So yeah, that's not good. And then as soon as the election results came in, we went back to DEFCON 5. It was just gone.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
It was really, it was kind of surreal at first, because I don't want another Cold War. I only lived through the tail end of the last one. I was only alive for the tail end of the last one, but I've read about it.
It wasn't good.
I've heard firsthand accounts of what went on, and all the living in fear and all that stuff. I'm like, I don't want that in my life. I don't need that.
Yeah, I don't want that either.
I don't want to know where the nuclear shelters are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. The Cold Wars and things like that.
He was getting very hawkish.
Yeah.
Also, watching the markets was interesting too. The markets really started to look like they were going to crash hard when it all of a sudden seemed like he was going to win, and then he gave his acceptance speech speech, and markets pretty much started to reverse from right there, and they've just been on a tear ever since.
Yeah, when they
pushing
opened
to
up
all new highs.
Yeah, when they opened up Monday morning, they hit an all-time high record. The Dow Jones did.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and
wow.
The word on the street was if Trump got elected, we could expect to see a significant correction in the market, and that proved to be wrong as well.
I think it was just people didn't know what to expect in those first few hours, and everybody panicked, and that's just what happens when people panic. But I think then people realized, okay, well, maybe it's not the end of the world, at least in financial sense, that Donald Trump is not going to destroy America financially, hopefully.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're probably right that election night people panicked and they traded off. They basically maxed the off-hour trading. They hit the off-hour trading limit.
Yeah,
they shut down.
Yeah,
they
had
to shut down trading, and then people saw that the opportunity to buy a lot of cheap stocks on Monday morning.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I really hope that he proves to be a good president. I don't mind shaking things up every once in a while. I'm just worried about some of the things that he has said. Yeah, who knows? He's such an interesting character.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible.
And he's held pretty much every position on every issue over the last few years. So.
But he'll say he hasn't.
Yes.
Well, he has proven to be an interesting negotiator, which is one of the credentials that he really likes to tell people about himself. He really holds things close to the chest and doesn't let you know, so you don't really never know where he stands on something, and that is an advantage as a negotiator, to not really know, to start making assumptions, and maybe that works in his favor. But seems to be approaching politics in the same way, so that's a little disconcerting for the citizens of the country that he's in charge of, to not know really where he stands. So I'm hoping for a lot more clarity over the next couple months, but I'm not so sure I'm going to get it.
I wonder if that's because he doesn't have a clue what he's doing, or because he's keeping his cards close to his chest. Like, which one of those two scenarios is more likely?
Who knows? More likely?
Okay, so that's a good question. What did you guys think about Obama meeting with Trump?
I felt really sorry for Obama, but he's a man of class. But some of the things that I've read about it are really interesting. Recently, I had read that people who were there at the meeting had said that Trump was kind of taken aback at the scale of the responsibility, as if he didn't really understand that, which doesn't really surprise me when you think about it. He doesn't really know what he's getting into. I mean, he's a total wild card. I think he may live a life where he just kind of barks orders at everybody. And I suppose you can do that as president, but I don't know. I don't know anything about being a president either.
Well, that's what's great. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. Just it's absolutely amazing that you see Trump in a vulnerable state, because he just acts like Mr. Invincible through this entire campaign, and then you get him in the White House with Obama, and all of a sudden he's keeping his head low. He's showing respect. You're like, oh my God. And then you're actually seeing him kind of act a little humble and be like, oh my God, I don't know what the hell's going on right now. There you go.
Well, on that note, we are actually out of time.
That is all the time we have for you this week. This has been the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Be sure to check out FreeThought Fort Wayne on Facebook and on meetup.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope your days are filled with logic, reasoning, and the eternal quest for knowledge.